Okay, so let's have another example, and this again is going to be a little bit more complicated because we are starting to get into complicated programming principles. We've seen how JustBasic can be used to accept string values as well as numeric values, and there's a slight problem with the way that JustBasic works in the fact that if we ask for a number and we actually enter a string value, then by default that number is assigned a value 0, which is actually incorrect. It's a transaction which can't take place. Other programming languages like C or Java would perhaps fall over and crash at this point rather than allowing such a thing to take place. So JustBasic is simple, it's robust, but it's actually allowing incorrect data into a program. So what this program does, it uses a function which we're going to write called getNumber to ask the user to enter a value, and that value will then be checked to see if it is actually a number or can be converted to a number, and if it is, then that number is returned. If it isn't, then the function will keep on asking the user until they enter a correct value. So let's see this in operation. So it's asking for a number, so let's give it a number, and it tells us that we entered the number 15, which is fine. So let's try it again. Let's try a decimal number, 1.2, that seems to be fine. And let's then give it a word, Fred. Sorry, invalid entry, please enter a number. So it's recognised that as an incorrect entry. So let's try something else. Harry, and again incorrect, so let's enter a number and it's happy. So that's the program. So let's have a look through it. So the main part of the program is this bit up here, because the end statement, when it reaches, will actually end the program. So it's a do loop which will keep on repeating as long as the user answers no to the question. Sorry, as long as the user answers yes, so while the answer isn't equal to no. So it's simply one line, number equals getNumber, and when that function returns, it prints out what the number was and then outputs an input statement saying, do you want to go again, effectively. So let's have a look at the getNumber function. So the getNumber function creates a variable called success, which is assigned a value 0, and while success is 0, it's going to repeat this section of code here. So it's going to ask the user to enter a number, and it's going to store that value as a string, so in a variable called stringIn. So we're assuming that the user will always be entering a string value. We're then going to create a value, another variable, and give it the value 0, and we're going to pass that across to a function called isNumber, which takes in two parameters, the string that was entered by the user and this new variable called value, which currently has a value of 0. So if isNumber, those two parameters, equals 0, so this if statement is doing a check on the value that is returned from this function isNumber, and if the value that's returned is 0, then success is set to 1, which caused this while loop to end, and then getNumber can actually be assigned the value of 0. So that would work well. If isNumber isn't 0, then success never gets set to 1, and this will repeat. So let's have a look at isNumber. isNumber down here takes in our string and then takes in value by reference, so we can actually change the value of value within this function, which would then get picked up back in the main function in this assignment here. So we're creating a new variable of type integer and assigning it the value of the string. So that's trying to do a conversion, and if it's successful we'll get a number, if not it'll be the default value, which is 0. So if we get a 0 answer, we know that the value that was entered by the user was either a string value, or perhaps they might have actually entered the value 0. So if the value that is in string num is anything other than 0, then we're happy, it's been a numeric value. Or if they actually entered a 0. So if string in is equal to the string 0. In either of those conditions, then return val is set to 0 and value is assigned the calculated value in string num, and isNumber is then assigned the value of return val, which is 0. So if isNumber is 0, then success equals 1. So that would cause this while loop here to end and the program to continue. If neither of these two conditions is true, so in other words, if string num is 0, then this causes return val equal to be set to equal to 1. Because this is an OR statement, then both of these have got to be false for the else statement to be executed. So string num has to be not equal to 0, and the value that was entered in the string has to be something other than 0. So if the user entered 1, then string num is going to be assigned the value 1, and string num isn't going to be equal to 0. So therefore both conditions are false, which then means return value can be given the value 1. If the user enters a string, so some text, so Fred for example, then string num is actually going to be given the value 0, and string in isn't going to be 0, it's going to be Fred, which therefore means both of these have actually again been failed. So that would mean that the else statement return val is assigned the value 1. So let's debug through the program and see what's going on, see how this is actually working. So we're in our while loop. We're going to be asking the user for a number, so we'll enter a number. We'll be kind to start with. That number gets assigned to the string, so you can see it's a string, it's inside quotation marks. We then create a new variable called value and give it the value 0, and we then make a call to this second function called isNumber, and we pass across string in and also value. So we're now in the second function, and we create a new variable called string num, which is assigned the result of this operation to try and convert whatever the string was to a value, and that converts 5 in quotes to a 5 number. So if 5, which is what's in string num now, is not equal to 0, which it isn't, then we're going to get into the true part of the statement. So return val is going to be assigned the value 0, value is going to be assigned whatever's in string num, which is 5. Our function will then return the value return val, which is 0. So we come back to here. So this function isNumber has returned the value 0. So that if statement is true, which then means success gets assigned the value 1, and we can then end and return the value that was entered, which is 5, and we can then output to the screen, ask the user if they want to go again. So we'll say yes, and this time we will enter some text. So we'll enter just the letter A, which obviously isn't a number. So we're going into the second function isNumber. We're passing across A and value. So string num is assigned the result of this operation to try and convert our A to a number, and that's going to be given the value 0. So if string num isn't 0, well, it is 0, so that part of the if statement's false. Or string in is equal to 0 in quotes, well, it isn't, it was an A, then the true part, well, neither of those conditions is true, so therefore we're going to come to the false part, and return val is going to be set to 1, which then means this if statement here is not true, because this function isNumber has returned 1, so 1 is not equal to 0. So therefore we're going to output sorry invalid entry and then repeat and ask again. If we then enter 0, which is a number, this is the one thing we haven't tested yet, then this time we're going to go into isNumber and we're going to convert whatever is entered as a string into a number, which is 0. So if string num is not equal to 0, well it is 0, so that part of the if statement is actually false. Or if string in string is equal to 0, well it is, so it's a special case, then our condition was true. So we can set the return val to 0, assign the value of string num to 0, and that will then return the value 0, which means that that if statement is true, so success is 1, and we then can finish successfully. So that's quite a complicated example, but it does show you how to use functions with parameters that are passed by reference to enable multiple things to be set with single function calls. So it is quite complicated. I'll leave the code up on screen again there just for you to try and copy, and again I'll add this into the Blackboard notes, but you could try typing that in, stepping through it and see if you understand it.